Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year 2022. It's very nice to have you guys here to meet you all again this year. I hope everyone is okay. For your information, earlier this evening, we had an earthquake here in Jakarta. It was a bit surprising, but we are glad to say that we are fine. Hopefully, the event will be held nicely as well. Tonight, we're here for Tua-Tua KELADI, or the Old Mind. This is a platform to share stories of other platforms who is talking about architecture as well. And tonight we will have Haziq Ariffin from Malaysia, who will talk about Lanai, his collective zine. And the title of his presentation is Collective by Design. Before we start, I would like to introduce Omah Library as the organizer of the event. Maybe some of you are not familiar with us. Omah Library, just like its name, is a library located in Jakarta. It's a small library that hosts books in architecture, and we also publish books and held events just like this regarding architecture with specification of topics like theory, history, criticism, method, investigation, etc. We hope that Omah Library can be a meeting point between students, academics, and also practitioners. If you are curious about us and our classes, we already have some of them uploaded to our website at omahlibrary.org. You can go there and access our classes for free. And for our book, we have several types of book. This one is series of Indonesian Architecture Masters. We already have 3 books. The last one, Muhammad Danis Moro, Begawan Fatmanabah, had just released at the end of last year, and we just had the launching earlier last week. And each of them has their own specific characters. Like this, Mr. Danis Moro here, he's an urban designer and also an architect and also a teacher. So in this book, we're curious about how he can manage to pull those 3 sectors at the same time. And then for other books, we also discuss about design method, like tectonic method, design method, and also craftsmanship. And we also have books about architecture discourses. This is very varied from fee or like the financial of architecture studio. We also have discussions about ornament, or ornament is a rhyme here, a book by Eka Swadiansa. It's about modern architecture. And we also have discourses about Nusantara, written by Abidin Kusno. I think this one maybe can be not only for Indonesian people, but also those who live in Southeast Asia maybe can relate to this book. We also have like philosophical book here, Wastu Miruda, Dr. Koprol. And this book has won an award from the Indonesian Architecture Association. And we also have books for students. We have many topics here. We have philosophy, theory, history, sustainable architecture, and so on and so forth. And last category, we have Indonesia and World Architecture Journey. written books about Alvar Aalto and Tadao Ando. And we also have a lot of books regarding Indonesian architecture. Like here you can see Oma, which is a book about Japanese architecture. And also right beside there is Keraton Yogyakarta, which is about the palace, the royal palace of Kesultanan Yogyakarta. And we also have other books about architecture from outside Java. We have Lobo, Arsitektur Lobo from Sulawesi Tengah, and then Guru Sina from the Nusa Tenggara, and then Radang from Kalimantan, Lima Banua from Sulawesi, and we have Ohoitane Eva from Rambakapis, Maluku. I'm sorry, from Tanimbar Barkei, Maluku, and then we have also Rambakapis from Kalimantan. And here we also have books about the Hindia Belanda architecture, like discussing about buildings that was built in the era of the Netherlands colonization. And that's pretty all about our book. Once again, I will introduce you what our event about. This is called Tua-Tua KELADI. It is why we call it Tua-Tua KELADI or the old mind. It's because these young people we invite in our event are, they have like visionary mindset. Like they don't study just for themselves. They love to share to other people what they are learning, and hopefully will spread positive impact into their surrounding. And one of them here is Haziq Ariffin. Further about him and what he's done with his friend in Lanai will be delivered by Nirma. Nirma here will be our moderator tonight. And before I pass it to Nirma, I would like to remind everyone to turn off your microphone for the presentation, and later, please share your thought, and maybe if you have questions, please share it in the comment section, or later you can raise your hand and we will invite you to speak. Okay, without further ado, I'll pass it to Nirma.
Okay, thank you very much, Hanifa, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Nirma from Mama Library, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event, the last session of Tua-Tua KELADI or The Old Mind, Season 1. We have Haziq Ariffin from Lanai, and as the previous 3 episodes, we already have Rizky Dikaputra from Rambuk Arsitektur, and Gary Yao from Project XYZ, and Joy Lee from Concrete Matter. Allow me to explain a little bit about the format of this webinar. First, I will give an introduction about the topic that Haziq will bring tonight, and then Haziq will present his materials to us. After that, we continue with the discussion session. So feel free if you have some questions to ask, please leave it on the chat room. I will invite you to open the camera and open the speaker and the camera later if you want. I can help you read your questions. Before we invite Haziq to talk in this session, I want to give a little introduction first about Haziq and his platform. Lanai is an independent Malaysian architectural zine produced by an informal collaborative collective which operates as a non-profit. Lanai aims to add to discourse around design and architecture in Malaysia by collating pieces of thoughts and provocations centered around specific themes, presenting it as a way to think about the world and inform their everyday practice. And if you are new with the term zine tends to be a bricolage of various text, images, and messages. You can share a manifesto here. You can also publish sketches, drawings, or mini comics, mix words with images and textures. Basically, what you can include in Zine is only limited by your imagination. And Haziq is a Malaysian based in London. Haziq worked in PR and communication for the built environment, drawing on his background in architecture and urbanism. He has an affinity for social and community work and is an advocate for sustainable system. He has a keen interest in cities, culture, and ecology. And perhaps we can get to know more about Haziq and Lanai from this session. All right, without further ado, I will invite Haziq to appear. Hi, Haziq. Are you ready?
Hello. Hi, Nirma.
Hi. Okay, the floor
You can
is
hear me
yours
fine, yeah?
now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nirma. Thanks, Hanifa, and thank you, Oma Library, Real Rich, for the invitation as well. I'm quite happy to be here. So today I'll be talking about Lanai. As Nirma mentioned, I've actually just started working in PR and comms for architecture. So I was working as an architectural assistant for 3 years in London. So I've just made a move to kind of go more into this field of publications and public relations and all that, which kind of follows on from working on this zine. Nirma, do you mind if you share the screen, please?
Yeah. Wait a minute.
So a zine actually is just does everyone know what a zine is? Maybe you can just type in the comments if anyone knows what it is, if anyone's made one, if anyone has bought one. I think the definition is quite open. I think for me, a zine is just something independent. It's usually quite small. It is like a magazine, but it's more informal. There are no adverts. Usually it's kind of like a free flow format. And yeah, so that's what it is. I do hope this conversation is going to be really informal. So please get involved. Stop me at any time as well if you have any questions, and just type in the chat box. So Lanai is the name of the zine and the platform. And Lanai actually means like a serambi, like a veranda porch that you have in front of your house. And it was kind of inspired by, this architectural space that allows conversations to happen. Usually it's quite informal. So you'd be sitting there with a drink, a hot drink, like a tea, and with some kueh, some pastries, and then just talk about everything, anything and everything. So we wanted the zine to kind of represent that ideology, that kind of culture. And what I wanted to kind of talk about today is how we've tried to do that as in the form of a collective, and why that was important for us. And kind of just my reflections on what Lanai has been doing. So it's been around for about, just over a year now. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. So Lanai is quite interesting because it was actually started completely online. It was started on a Discord group that was started by a few of us. You can feel free to scan that QR code and you can join our Discord group. We'd be more than happy to have you. But basically, it's just an informal Discord group of people who studied architecture or are involved in architecture and design, or just interested in architecture. It was started by some people from my old university in Malaysia, and it's kind of grown quite a bit. But basically what happened was this was during the lockdown, the first lockdown, if you can remember that, many, many years ago. And how we just found ourselves stuck at home, unable to kind of socialize and all of that. So this was a nice way, and we realized that we got on with each other, we liked each other, and we used it to discuss a lot of things related to architecture. And in Discord, there's also kind of a voice channel. And what happened is that we joined there and we just started talking about life and kind of ended up talking about architecture. With anyone with like an architecture background, it doesn't take long before architecture is the main part of the conversation. So we started talking about that, but then we also started talking about what we don't like about architecture, stuff about long work hours, stuff about being exploited, bad experiences with contractors that, it's not so nice and all that. So we started venting. And that happened for a few days until we kind of realized as well that we don't just want to talk and complain. We were just asking, what else can we do about this? There was probably about 10 or 12 of us regulars who came and just talked. And it was across the world as well. So there were a few of us in the UK. So I'm based in London, and there were also people in Malaysia, and a few kind of scattered around like Germany and all that. And then so the zine was kind of our way of doing something about our complaints. Yeah. So we used Discord to kind of discuss that, and that's where it was born. So if we go to the next slide. And a collective this is the definition from Mr. Google, basically a group of people or entities that share or are motivated by at least one common issue or interest and work together to achieve a common objective. So those are the three things they have, they share one common interest. For us, it's architecture. And then we work together and we want to achieve a common objective. So I think those are the three kind of main components. And can we go next, please? So basically, another thing about a collective for us anyway, is that it is informal. There isn't really a hierarchy, and people come and go, because we realize that, everyone has their own commitments, and Lanai is a complete like side thing for all of us. It's something we do for fun. It's not super serious, but it's also not something that we take very lightly. We kind of put our heart into it, I think. So we wouldn't want to see it fail. We don't want to, yeah, we do care about it, but it's not the main priority for everyone. And this really nice illustration was done by one of the members. Where is he in the picture? So he's in the front, Edmund THX. So he did this really nice illustration of people who are involved in the zine. But this kind of family or this kind of group will change, and people will come and go. I might go, I might come. It depends on the availability. But one thing is that everyone has the heart, and everyone wants to do something about architecture, whether they want to have a voice or they want to say something about it. And it tends to be that everyone has an architecture background, but we do want to change that as well, because I think architecture, or people within architecture, stick within their circles, and the conversation actually becomes a lot more interesting when we get different people involved. Yeah, should we go to the next one? So yeah, kind of related to that, we don't think that architecture is one thing. It's definitely not just buildings. It is definitely about people. And then what about people? So it's about culture, it's about politics, it's about art, technology, sociology, ecology. It's about everything: agriculture, food, travel, heritage. It's so many things. And when we go to the bookshelf in a bookstore and look at the architecture, what you see on the front covers is always buildings, and it's always kind of commentary on the buildings. Sometimes it's not even critical, it's just describing the building. And we wanted to be something different than that. We knew that like our architecture background made us look at the world in a different way. And we wanted to use that, and just use that way of looking at the world, and actually just look at the world and talk about it, and make content. It was gonna be kind of informal, and it was also kind of providing a platform for the younger people, because I think a lot of publications and all that, it's done by people who are more mature, people who are kind of veterans in the industry. And so the younger people don't really get that voice. They don't have the platform to say whatever they want to say. And that's the power of the zine, because anyone can make content nowadays. And also that's kind of related as to why we wanted it to be in print, but I'll talk about that in a bit more later. Can I just check that everyone can still hear me and I'm not talking to myself? Because it is a bit weird.
It's very clear.
Okay. Okay, great. Should we go to the next slide? So I kind of want to frame today's session around this idea of be, do, have. And it's not a philosophy that like we started out with consciously, but it's just a way that I've used to reflect on what we've done. And it's just this idea that you can look at life in different ways. And so there are kind of three characters. So one, you can be a victim, and the victim would arrange their life in the order of have, do, be. So they will say stuff like, when I have enough time, money, friends, and the right connections, then I'll do the things I've always wanted to do. And then after that, I'll be happy and I'll succeed and I'll be amazing. But the problem is I don't have these things yet. So I can't do anything. So I can't be the person I want. So they're always waiting for like something to happen. They're always waiting for them to have something in order to be happy. That's not super productive. And then the second type of person is, oh, sorry, can we go to the next slide? Actually, no, before that, let's go back. Yeah, so then the next person is a worker or doer. So they think about do, have, and then be. So they say, the more I do, the more I'll have, right? Just do. The more, and then after all this doing, then I'll have, and then the happier I'll be. The problem is that when you do more, then there's more to do. Like your task list never ends, right? If you keep a to-do list, that to-do list, it never really ends. And then you'll have more to do, and then you become so driven and so busy and so tired that you actually lose sight of what you want to be. And so it's also quite difficult to be this way. The third person would orient their life as be, do, have. So they you need to know what you want to have. You do need to think about these three things, right? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? But it's kind of a matter of arranging how you see it. And so this last person would say it as, it's not what I want, what I need to do to have before I can start, or what work do I need to do, but it's a question of who do I need to be? What kind of person would have access to the things that I want? And then I want to be that person, and then everything else will fall into place. And so I think about this in the context of the zine itself. So if we go next, I think what we wanted with the zine is this. We wanted to have a thriving, abundant, and collaborative culture, specifically within the architectural scene. And what that means is a thriving, meaning that it's alive, it keeps growing, it doesn't stop, because there are a lot of initiatives that start and stop. And that's nothing wrong with that. They provide a spark, they provide some conversation, very kind of contemporary. But then we wanted it to be continuous. We wanted it to be sustainable. Abundant, meaning there's something for everyone. It's not specifically catered for such a small target audience. We do want it to be, everyone can get something from it. It doesn't have to satisfy someone 100%, but if we can give 10% to 100 people, we think that's successful. And collaborative, just meaning, involve many different people. Like I mentioned, we do want to expand outside of the architecture circle. I think nowadays we are seeing the architecture is becoming a lot more mainstream, at least here in the UK, like because architecture and the built environment, buildings and construction play such a big role in environmental concerns that everyone is talking about it now. And architecture is always political as well, where you decide to build something and what it looks like and who it's built for. These are like really important questions. and it's definitely becoming more mainstream and becoming less about the building and what the building and more about what the building stands for and the people around it and the culture and all of that. So we wanted to capture this. So that's what we wanted to have. So then the next question to ask is, what do we need to do, right? So if we go to the next slide. And I think we realized that in order to achieve that, what we wanted to do is to provide an alternative outlet that is kind of free for all, it's equal opportunity, and it celebrates diversity and inclusivity. And this is kind of related to, when we share our frustrations on the Discord and we realize that only certain people get a voice, get a stage to share what they want to share. And it's the same people usually, or connected to the same people. And I think that that's unfortunate because you miss out on a lot of different voices. And as creative people, I think we need to hear that. We see the same thing over and over again. It gets pretty boring quite quickly. And so if we go to the next slide, if that's what we want to do, we realize that the most effective way to do that is to be a collective. And the reason for this is more so based on our circumstances. The fact that all of us who wanted to do this, we have either a full-time job or we're still studying. So it's not a full-time initiative. And we didn't want that to be a reason for us not to do it. Just because we can't give our full-time attention to it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. To not be able to do it perfectly doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So this is just how we realized that we needed to be, I think. It suits our time, it suits our ambition, it suits our budget. We can support each other. Like I mentioned before, if someone is busy for the next 3 months, then someone else within that collective can step in, right? So it needs kind of a big enough group, it needs trust, it needs communication, and it also needs this understanding that we operate like this. We are a collective, so we understand each other's needs and timelines and all of that. And I think what comes with it as well is, I mentioned before that there's not really a hierarchy, it's quite flat. So we make decisions based on consensus, what most people think, and if anyone has any particular strong objections to it. I kind of promised that today I'll talk about the failures as well, because I think that sharing just the good stuff it's not really that productive or useful. And I think, it's all nice to say that we work like this and we are happy collective, but it doesn't always work that way. It is hard. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so just operating collective by design. I think design is a word, it's a verb to problem solve, right? And so I think the way we operate as well, so what goes on behind the zine itself. So even if the zine is a design product, but the thing that makes the zine happen and come into the world is also a design, how we work and how we operate, the framework, the teamwork and all that. I think, at least for me, I see it as an experiment, how we work with each other, how we communicate, whether some things work, and if they don't, how do we change it? And so, like I mentioned, even though it's a nice idea that we work on this horizontal way with no hierarchy, it doesn't always work because it's really hard, right, to get everyone's consensus on it. Now, again, and if someone has an issue, how do we come to an agreed compromise or an agreed outcome? It's not always easy, but I think that's what makes it fun. And it's also why we want to do it, I think. I don't think we want to do it just because we want the zine out. We want to do it because we want to question ourselves and be creative and think and make choices. And so it's not been the easiest thing to be a collective, but I think it's the most rewarding thing. And at the end of it, you still get a zine, and that's amazing. And another thing I mentioned is that we we do work across time zones as well. So there are people, maybe I think half of us now are in Malaysia and half of us are here in the UK. And so we need to find a way to make this work. And it's quite interesting because half of us probably have not met each other either. And so we operate just based on voice and text, which is quite interesting. And it has its pros and cons as well. Oh, by the way, if you came to the previous sharing by Gary of XYZ, Gary's also part of this collective. So yeah. Okay, so if we go next. So yeah, I think that's just how we understand it. And if you have any questions about, you know, what works or what doesn't, please do just ask. Okay, I think we'll continue now to talk about the actual zine. Go to the next slide, please. So the zine actually was born, like I mentioned, because of the pandemic and because of the lockdowns. We just found so much time at home. And so this timeline just shows how it kind of coincided and how it was like a dance, basically, of lockdown, then we make a zine, and then we're able to go out, we got vaccinated, and then it became a bit slower because people are going out and having a life. And then another lockdown, so we come back and we do a zine, and it's kind of been this interesting rhythm to it. And yeah, I think it wouldn't be here without the pandemic, I don't think. And it will be interesting to see how it continues post-pandemic, you know, when that day comes, which it will. And I think what we want to do now is already think about that and how do we be sustainable. Another thing that's interesting as well is because we insisted on the zine to be a physical thing right from the start. We wanted to connect with the readers in a different way. And I think that especially now, like digital content is so saturated. You see so much from Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, everything. Like there's so much voice, that to be intentional about what you read and what you consume. So you have to order the zine and you have to wait for it to arrive. You have to make the bank transfer. You know, there are multiple steps before you actually get it in your hands and read it. And we're hoping that by the time it does reach your hands and you read it, you're excited, you set aside time, and you digest it in a very different way than if it was just on Instagram. And that's interesting as well because during the pandemic, everyone is at home. So to receive something, I think, was quite special. To receive something in the mail, you know, you're looking forward to it. Or if you're collaborating with us or you submit a piece, that's also a different experience of connecting with people. And ultimately, like architecture, if architecture is all about people, the zine is also just completely about people. It's about the community of people who collaborate with us, the community of people who read the zine, and the community of people who share the content. I think that's what brings us the most joy. If we go to the next slide, please. So we also had made quite a few kind of conscious decisions as a collective at the beginning. We wanted it to be quite accessible. So we sold the first 3 issues at just 5 ringgit, which is, I think, equivalent to about 17,000 rupiah. So that's really cheap. I mean, it's about like, yeah, I'll come back to it later. Another decision we wanted to make was that it would just be printed in black and white. This is to do with cost, but also just to be environmentally friendly, and also to kind of offer that different experience, like I mentioned as well. UR is just saturated by loads of pretty imagery, and to kind of step it back to just monochrome and have this feel of being photocopied, you know, we put it together, it's very handmade. Well, handmade in the sense of putting on the printer, but yeah. So that was another thing. And then we decided early on that it wasn't going to be available digitally for the reasons that I mentioned. But I think now after having made 3 issues, I think we realized that this might not be the smartest idea. So we might transition to making it available online as well. And it's because there are people who have wanted copies and they're not in Malaysia. And we feel slightly conflicted because we don't really want to print kind of print it in Malaysia and then ship it halfway across the world. It doesn't feel very eco-friendly. And so I think the way to combat this also is that we would be looking for partners who can print it in the local areas as well. So let's say if there's anyone listening who's in Indonesia and you want to collaborate with us and you want to print it locally and distribute it locally, I think that's much better than us printing in KL and sending it over, especially when it's, 2, 3, or 10 copies. It doesn't really make much sense. And then we'll look into doing it digitally as well. So I think, like what I mentioned, this is the spirit of the zine. Like, you just continuously evolve and iterate, and what doesn't work and what works, and just think about it. And yeah. Okay, so if we go to the next slide. So I mentioned that it is quite cheap, but what you get for it, I think, is definitely worth it. It comes in A5 size. So this was for the first issue. It was 72 pages, black and white, and there were 14 pieces. And not only that, on top of that, for every copy that we sold, we could print another copy that we then gave for free to an architecture student. And why we thought that was important to begin with is, obviously, one is just to increase our reach and more people will see us. But also we just thought that, we thought back to when we were students and we just never really was exposed to stuff like this. We didn't even read books from the library and stuff like that. So we wanted it to be more accessible. We wanted it to make it as effortless as possible for the students, hoping that they would engage. Again, like I said, after 3 issues, I think we are questioning this a bit more, because we're also realizing that most of the people who do buy from us or who give us feedback are not students anymore. They're probably fresh grads. And so we're kind of exploring this again. We go to the next slide. So yeah, so I think now we'll just talk about what the 3 zines were, and then have a bit more time at the end to talk about just casually. Our first issue was titled Status, and it was kind of just to set the tone, set a benchmark, and examine the status of architecture in Malaysia, whether that's professionally or in education or culturally in the media and stuff like that. And that's what it looks like. We were able to kind of have it in a bookstore, in an independent bookstore. You see there the picture on the right, that's in Tinta Budi, which is a bookstore. So that was really nice. And I think another nice thing that you can see here as well about having it as a physical zine is that, like your architecture portfolio, it becomes a physical product that you can carry around, that you can give people, and that you can take pictures of, because you can't take pictures of an Instagram feed, and I think this is quite nice. And it's kind of showed up in interesting places. Like, we would get tagged and it's like in a random cafe in Malacca or something. So that's been quite nice. If we go to the next slide. So this is the kind of content that is available, or that was issued in the first one. And you can actually read all of this now online if you go to lanaizine.com. It's being hosted on issue.com. But yeah, if you go through our website, then you can read all of this. And it's a mixture of things, as you can see, from politics to COVID to just reflections and commentary and all that. And it's also a mixture of graphics and words, and a mixture of different collaborators. So that's, yeah. If you go next. So with every issue, we still tried to use Instagram, but we've tried to kind of just give teasers and a sneak peek into what it has. Because I do understand, like, if it was me, if I was not part of Lanai and I heard about it, I probably wouldn't buy it if I don't know what's inside, or I would buy it just because my friends are in it. So we wanted to kind of promote it this way. And I think it was quite successful. I think, especially given that it's the first issue and no one knew what we were doing, I think it was all right. If we go to the next slide. So with that first issue, we sold enough that we were able to give away 120 copies to 4 different universities, 30 copies for each, and they were kind of distributed. We identified kind of community leaders or like people who could help to distribute it within the university. So that was really fun. Okay, go next. Another way of kind of just reaching out, we try to experiment with Instagram wherever we can as a means of reaching out. And for the first issue, we did this sembang session. So just sitting down, having a chat on Instagram Live. We did it with each of the authors that submitted a piece for the first issue. And it was just really casual. Someone from the team at Lanai and someone from one of the collaborators, one of the contributors would just sit and chat and then interact with the audience as well. And this was really fun. And I think we want to do more of this stuff as well. But yeah, go to the next issue. So the next issue is rituals. And it was a bit more relaxed, and it was just getting us to reflect on what we do at home or out and about. And this was our attempt at looking at the world through the architecture lens, looking at the mundane but presenting it with the architecture background. If we go next. So we had a lot more contributors this time, 26, so almost double. And that also came from people who had bought the zine before, but also from people who had told their friends and they were just interested. And we had a good number of pre-orders for this and a wide range of kind of types of content. And what you see on the page there, again, is just our Instagram feed of trying to get it out. Go to the next slide. So these are just the titles. We actually had one contribution by an Indonesian, number 3, Apanya Ritual by Ryoga. And one thing I forgot to mention as well is that this zine, it does aim, it has the ambition of being multilingual. So for example, that piece by Ryoga, he wrote in Bahasa, but then we translated it into English and we presented both. So some of them also submit in Mandarin, so number 17, for example, and we'll also translate that into English and present it side by side. So we never just translate it into English and forget the original one. We include both, and we just write a note that we translated it with the author's permission as well. And so it's really a collaborative process. And I think this is important for us in Malaysia, and I'm sure in Indonesia and everywhere in Southeast Asia, that we are diverse and we don't want to dilute that just by being English. But then we also recognize that English is the most widely spoken thing. So yeah, we go to the next slide. So this, like I said, we try to experiment with Instagram. So another thing we did is this kind of photo prompt. We just posted that photo and asked them to sketch their rituals. And it was really fun and a nice way to kind of just engage. But also through this, we were surprised that we received a really nice submission. You see on the one on the right-hand side. It was so nice that we ended up using it as our cover, obviously with their permission. So we go next. So yeah, we took that Instagram story and made it our cover, and I think it looks really nice. It's quite fun. We go next. And I think this was like a big step and a big milestone for us. So this is about a year after we started, or maybe less, maybe 10 months. But we decided that this was also acted on impulse by a conversation online. I think it was on Clubhouse at the time, where people were just complaining about how low our salary is in Malaysia. And we're just like, but we don't have the numbers. And everyone kept saying, oh, you don't have proof, you don't have evidence, whatever. And we're like, okay, you know what? We'll get the evidence. So we decided to just launch a survey and try to get it out as much as possible. And the survey was just identifying or trying to identify whether it was true or not that the salary is low. So we ran the survey for, I think, 2 months, and then we had our analysis. And then we included this in our 3rd issue as kind of a big reveal, I guess. So if we go next. our third issue was called Crisis. I think this was quite timely because a lot of things were happening, environmental crisis, political crisis. Those are the two things that come to my head. But then also, this idea of the survey allowed us to present that as a crisis as well. And how do we solve it? And I think in crisis, there's two things. One is you just want to identify it, that it is happening. And then also just how do you then go about and solving it? And this issue was really fun, and I think it's the bravest issue that we've done. So if we go to the next slide. We had 22 contributors for this and 90 pre-orders, and we included the workforce survey kind of as part of that. And this was still quite recent. I think this was November last year. And if we go next. So in that time also, like if you noticed on the timeline, that we also presented this on our website. We launched the website and we held the responses there. So we got quite a good response to the survey, almost 500, which is a good kind of sample size. So yeah, if we go next. So this is how we presented the results from the survey. And it was very, very well received. A lot of people engaged with it. A lot of people were surprised, and it was shared quite a bit by people. And it was definitely the most engagement that we got. I think we almost doubled our followers just by doing all of this on Instagram. And then if we go next. So yeah, we're always looking for people to partner with. Some people have been really kind. So like Suburbia Projects and Tinta Budi, they're both independent kind of bookstores, and Suburbia is also like an event space. And they've offered to kind of hold our zine and sell it to their customers. And we're always looking for more people like that, just to get it out there. But also we recognize that we are independent and that we don't have the capacity to do like a full-on business plan. But yeah, if you go next. So yeah, we're thinking that for our next issue, which is issue number 4, that the theme will be play. So if you're interested, if any of this sounds really good to you, we'll probably post a call for content in a few weeks' time or in a month's time. So do follow us on Instagram and you'll be updated there. We'll kind of give more details about what this means, but play is quite a generic term that you can make of it what you want, interpret it how you want. Yeah, we go to the next slide, which is also the final slide. We would love feedback. So if you scan the QR code, it will take you to a Google Forms where we just have some very simple questions for you. If you could do that, that'll be amazing. And I think that's it. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I hope that was okay. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Haziq, for your presentation and what you do in Zine. I think it's amazing. I kind of want to follow up about what you've said before about what works and what doesn't. Lanai operating mostly by digital platform, there's time that you made a copy of course of Lanai, and finally physically interacting to people. Can you tell us the pros and cons that Lanai has been through on that? I mean by
sorry.
Yeah.
The pros and cons of what, sorry?
Yeah, pros and cons that Lanai has been through by operating mostly by digital platform.
All right. I think the pro is that we can work across time zones. So I think that's amazing. So, and also just being able to work at our own time. I think the con is that it is much harder to do this. It's much harder to organize. It's much harder to bring people together at the right time. And I think as well, like it does make it, sometimes it makes it more creative. Sometimes it makes it less creative. Because I think that sitting around a table and working around, like doing something together has its benefits, especially with a zine. Like imagine if you can just cut and paste things and arrange it on a board together in front of you, or just play with post-its, you know, there's a lot of things that you can't do digitally, but it's also why it's been able to sustain. So ideally, I think it would be nice to have a mixture. Yeah.
Thank you. And you've been distributed an impressive number of copy per issue. I've seen in the presentation. How do you feel that, your creator, your content, your idea, your zine published in some places and read by many people? Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it feels amazing. I think as well, like if you're working in architecture, like the project takes so long, that I think that's why people who do architecture, they do a lot of like side hustles or side gigs, because they are creative people, and they I think for some people to be creative, you need quicker feedback. Yeah, so it's really nice to see out there and getting feedback. I think that's the thing. So we're quite insistent on that. I think we want to know what people think, and we want to grow with them. We want them to be as part of the process, not just like consumers. And I think that's another thing with architecture, is that we actually don't really get feedback for our work. The building goes up, people use it, and then we never hear from it. It's like, did it work or did it not work? Like we never know. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, we have Gary here. I want to see his sound if he's available.
Hi.
Hi, Gary. Hi.
Hi. Happy New Year. How's everyone doing? Good?
Hi. Happy New Year.
Yeah. How are you? Good, good.
Do you have a question for Haziq maybe, or share your thoughts about Haziq presentation?
I think it's interesting because I think he pointed out the things that, a lot of people tend to think that Lanai, I mean, not just Lanai, but when we present our endeavors or our little projects, we tend to, say the good things about it. But I think Haziq's presentation is very honest and transparent about how we've been, what we have been through. Especially as Haziq mentioned, the whole thing was sort of came out from COVID. I think that's very interesting and still kind of amazed me, because somehow that, a lot of people that I never met before, and then somehow we come up with a project for the last 3 issues and coming 4th issue. So I think that's very interesting that, a lot of time we tend to see, whatever people doing on Instagram or how many followers they have. But in fact, there are so many hardships that a certain initiative been through. Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting one. And thanks a lot, Haziq, for sharing, and Oma Library for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary. Do you have any other questions, maybe, Gary?
Not at the moment actually, but I'm more curious, because like Haziq mentioned, he's now recently stepped into a new career path. I just wonder, so far, how do you see the relationship between what you are doing as a job and how does it apply to Lanai? And I'm quite interested in that. Do you see I mean, of course, there must be a lot of common points, because somehow when we talk about marketing and talk about content, I think pretty much aligned. But how do you see different ball games, when you play into different kind of role as well? So it's more of a comparison between what you are doing now as a job and what you're doing as a hobby. Yeah, I'm quite curious with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like part of the reason why I got this job is also because of the zine. Like to have that on the CV, and then they ask me like, oh, what is that? And then I explain, and it helped me kind of move away from architecture in a way that I wanted to move. And so I guess that's another thing with the side hustles, especially during the pandemic, that you just do it and you don't expect anything, but then it takes you somewhere. It's definitely related, I think. It's both about kind of talking about architecture rather than doing it. So celebrating what's going on, but also being quite critical of it. I mean, PR is not journalism, so you can't be too critical, obviously. You want to represent your clients in a good way and elevate their brand. But you are constantly up to date. You have to be updated on what's happening. You have to be very current, I think. And so I think that helps with looking at this. And also another thing with my job is that I have to have a kind of broader picture. It's not just, before this I was looking at, 1 to 5 drawings, 1 to 1 drawings, 1 to 2. And now I need to look at a much bigger scale of what's going on in the city, who's talking to who, which new developments are happening. And then if you broaden that out again, how are the cities talking to each other? You broaden it out again, what's happening in the world. And so it's a completely different scale of architecture, I think.
Yeah, sorry. I just have one more question that pops out in my head, because like you mentioned, you somehow got this job, because of Lanai. And previously in our sharing session with Pam, Ririk was honored enough to be one of our guests. It was titled "Other Ways of Doing Architecture." I mean, we have been promoting this kind of alternative practice for quite a while, but then we somehow managed to, I mean, me myself was sort of come out from architecture partly because of XYZ. It's not because of my architecture experience. And I got my job because of that. It's not because, because of my design portfolio actually. So what would be your advice? Because for those people we have been talking about, jumping out of architecture, but yet they don't have the portfolio to do things outside architecture. How would you see that actually? I mean, a lot of people must be wanted to jump out from architecture, but they don't have the portfolio or Lanai as a backup or XYZ as a backup.
Yeah. I mean, I think just be patient, but also really just ask yourself, do you actually want to jump out of architecture? Or because now it's becoming more trendy and more popular. So don't just be pressured by other people. And also you might feel pressure about, architecture being low pay and all this, but I think ultimately you have to ask yourself whether you really want to or not. And then my advice is, if you do want to jump out of it, then try doing a side hustle first of what it is you want to do. So let's say it's pottery, furniture making, whatever it is. Try doing it first as a side hustle just for fun. And I think don't expect anything from it. I think don't do it with the ambition, with the aim of okay, I'm starting this because it's going to be my ticket to leave architecture. Just do it just for fun. And then I think you never know where it takes you. Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot, Haziq.
Thank you very much, Gary, for your questions. I'm curious, how do you guys, I mean, Gary also in the team, right? How do you guys come up with ideas and discuss about it?
Yeah, Haziq, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think we do use the Discord, and I think we just talk to each other, right? And also because we do it in an open call kind of format, that we can't really control what happens. So what people submit, and then we kind of have to judge based on that. So far, we've been very lucky that everyone submits really interesting things. So we haven't really had to reject anyone yet. And then with the idea of the graphics, it comes from anywhere, anywhere and everywhere. Some people will just suggest something, and then we'll discuss what is that a good idea, or how can we improve it, or whether it's just it's fine the way it is. So yeah, I think that again that falls back on the idea of operating as a collective. Yeah.
Yeah, follow up questions. Yeah, you collect candidate of contributors for the issue, and tell me a little bit more the process of how do you and your team curating the content.
So I think it starts with choosing a theme, and the theme for us, I think it's important that it's broad enough to kind of have as many people be able to join the conversation as possible, but at the same time, not too broad that it's not saying anything. I think we still want to frame a certain issue or topic. But take for example like crisis. Everyone has some form of crisis going on in their lives or in the lives around them. So everyone can say something, or something like play. Everyone was a child at some point. We all like to play, and now that we're adults, how do we look at that? So I think it begins with choosing a theme and framing that from internally, how do we see it, but then also opening that up to others. And then curation wise, whatever comes in. So like I mentioned, so far we haven't had to reject anyone. So I don't know what that process would be like. Maybe in the future, we'll let you know. But I think an important thing editorial wise is choosing the flow of which pieces come first and which pieces come after another, because this kind of affects how you read the zine and what your thoughts are. It's almost like when you design a floor plan, the circulation, when you go from one room to the next, which rooms are adjacent to which, what can you see from where? And we think about that in terms of the publication itself. So I do have like zines here. So this is the first issue, but this is the only like real copy that I have because they're all printed in Malaysia. So someone from Malaysia brought me this, and then the rest I just print at home by myself, like editor's copy. And yeah, so we just go through this and see whether it flows well. And I think there's not really a science to that. It's just intuition and how we feel about it. And then graphics is a different thing as well. So, and then it kind of just comes together at the end. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much, Gary. Hanifa has a question for you.
Yeah.
All right. Hi.
Hi.
One of my questions has been asked by Nirma, so I think we'll pass to the next question. How long is the process to produce one issue? Like from the time you decide on the theme until you publish it. And I want to know, is zine a common thing in Malaysia? Because for me here in Indonesia, I don't see much of it unless I go to like very artsy neighborhood. Then there I will find one or two zines, but in my daily neighborhood, I didn't find any. And then how do people respond to the birth of Lanai? Yeah, I think that's my question.
Okay. With the time, I think we try to do it within 3 months. But again, this has some flex to it. It changes. Some people like, things can happen that are outside of our control. So then we just adjust, whether it's like, okay, add another 1 week, add another 2 weeks, but we try to keep to the timeline of 3 months. And that's like a month of open call, a month of editing, a month of graphics, or a month of promotion, stuff like that. We wanted to make it a quarterly zine. We wanted to make 4 issues a year, but after making the first 2, we realized that we're not really capable of that. So I think now we've lessened our ambition, and it's more like 2 issues a year. But I think it can change, and that's like the thing about zine as well. Like if it's not super kind of rigid, it can kind of flex. Although I think it would be nice to reach a point where it's more regular, so that people know when to expect. So they know like, oh, September, Lanai is out. Yeah. Second question was, the zine culture in Malaysia. I think it is more prevalent amongst like the art scene. So and also kind of other culture, so like LGBT issues. I think because it's kind of things that cannot come up in normal newspapers or normal magazines. That's why zines come up. It's because they don't have that voice. They don't. So it's more centered around like taboos, things that people can't talk about. It's not that we can't talk about architecture, but it just takes a lot of effort and a lot of like gatekeeping, a lot of more senior people holding the conversation, and we just wanted to say our own thing. As far as I know, I think we're the first architecture zine, but I don't want to make that call because I'm not sure. Or maybe not actually, no. Actually, no. There have been some people who did it before.
Maybe in your generation.
In our generation, yes. Yeah. There is the previous generation. I can't remember the name, but I know the people behind it. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to know if there's any like it in Indonesia. And then I think the other thing is response. Yeah, the response, I think it's been interesting. I think some people have understood what we're trying to do, but I think a majority of people are still like, what the hell is Lanai? And what is it doing? I don't understand it. What is a zine? Why is it not printed? Like there's still, people still have a lot of questions. And I think they're still quite hesitant on like properly engaging, but you know, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, you said you're gonna make your own, right? You're gonna make your own zine.
Yeah, I've been wanting to, but like I said before, I just clueless on how to start. And so this presentation has been very helpful. I have a lot of new ideas here going around in my head. Hopefully
Nice.
we can make one soon enough.
Nice.
Okay, thank you, Haziq.
Thank you, Hanifa.
Thank you, Hanifa.
Rich has a question for you. I just read it. Can you give illustration of the problem of architecture profession in Malaysia? To give a bit of context, is there any problem in architecture literacy or architecture criticism?
In my opinion, yes. I think this is, you know, everyone's gonna have subjective opinions, but in my opinion, yes. I think right now we don't have the current generation and maybe a little bit of the previous generation as well. There hasn't been a culture of criticism in a good way of, you know, how do we talk about buildings? How do we talk about architecture? How do we learn from each other? It's not really there. And the architecture magazines that are available to us don't do that. So there's not really an outlet. So I think even in school as well, like we don't know how to criticize things and we take that as if it's a bad thing. I think it's not, like you need it to grow. Even here in the UK, like they talk about it as if, I think they have maybe 4 or 5 prominent architectural critics, and for them that's not enough. Like we need more voices, because most of them also tend to be white men, and you know, everyone's going to have different points of views. The opinion of a single mother on architecture is going to be completely different, whether we can use buses or, you know, like our priorities are different. So we need to encourage everyone to criticize what's going on around them. So I think that's definitely a problem, and hopefully that's what Lanai will provide. Even with the survey that we did, I think it was seen as a brave thing to do. And I think that's another issue. Like some people are just scared of saying things and scared of being wrong. And I think we are too. Like we're really scared. We're still very scared that one day someone is going to come to us and be like, you're wrong. But it's okay. I mean, if we're wrong, then we're wrong. Tell us why and tell us how we can improve, and then we'll move on. Yeah.
Just do it like Gary said.
Yeah, just do it.
The comment, yeah. This is the last question for you. And this is the same question actually I've asked to Reski from Rembuk Arsitektur and to Joy as well. And I think it's fun if I ask you the same question. The question is, how does your platform Lanai change you by far as a person? What is the difference between Haziq before Lanai and Haziq after Lanai was born?
Oh, so many things. But also we have to remember that that's basically asking, how have you changed during this pandemic? Which is a lot. Like I think everyone has changed a lot, right? But I think with Lanai specifically, it's taught me how to how to work in a team, how to work in a team full of architects with very strong ideas and strong opinions, how to come to a decision or how to come to a compromise, how to organize different things, how to sell a product, and also how to get a different job. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes, I think. And I think, ultimately all of that has also just taught me to be a bit more patient and have fun, and not everything has to be so serious like architecture. And the architecture can be fun as well. Yeah.
All right. Before I end this session, Haziq, do you have any other closing statement to share?
No, but I hope that you do get involved. I do hope that a zine comes out of this, a new zine comes out of this, or maybe many new zines. All of you can start one, whoever's listening out there. Yeah. And I think get involved as well. Follow us on Instagram, join the Discord if you want to, and just keep in touch, I think. Can I share the link to the feedback form?
Yeah, sure.
Let me just get it. 1 second. Yeah, so that's the feedback form.
Okay.
And then if you don't have the link to the Discord, just message us on Instagram, and then we'll get you that.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you for listening, and thank you for the invitation. Really happy to be talking to Indonesia. I think, actually, like one of our first visions also was to not expand, but like to connect with Southeast Asian neighbors and friends. So it'll be nice if Indonesia is the first one.
Thank you very much, Haziq. I'm very happy to listening to your presentation about Lanai, and during this session, I see Haziq as a person with a great ability to contemplate things or what happens around him, and I think he belongs to this platform to express the idea and thinking, like what Haziq told before, that architecture is not one thing, but it is related to many topics, and that's what makes it more interesting. I realized that mostly our speakers platform on Tua-Tua KELADI season 1 was created during pandemic when everyone globally have lockdown. And here I've seen, a beauty in disguise. I'm so happy that you guys find a creative way to gather people, make a new platform to discuss and share ideas. I mean, also here we are, we can meet and share interesting stories of yours. Thank you very much, Haziq, for closing this session with sweet story of yours and what you've been doing on Lanai. Also, I'm looking forward for the next issue of Lanai Play. Yeah, please check out on their issues through their social media at Lanai Zine and lanaizine.com. And if you are interested, of course, you can get a copy just for 5 ringgit, right? Since this time is still in the atmosphere of New Year, where usually people create resolution, I hope this session also inspired audiences here to strive on achieving the goals or even find a new goal for this year's. Thank you so much for the audiences tonight for your enthusiasm. I also would like to say thank you to our friend behind this event who's helping to help this event, Hanifa and Lulu, and also Farhan and Satria as well, also Kak Rich as well. And I'll give back the session to the host, Hanifa.
All right, thank you so much, Nirma. Very well said. Yeah, I think we're reaching the end of Tua-Tua KELADI season 1. Before we close the Zoom meeting, we will have a photo session together. I ask everyone to turn on your camera and show your best smile. All right. Oh, Kak Rich is together with
Hi,
Rachel.
Hi.
All right, we're going to have a picture together. Everyone's ready.
Where's Joey?
Oh yeah,
Hey.
yeah, Joey. Yeah, thank you for Joey, for Gary, Haziq, and Kak Rizky, who unfortunately can't join me today. But thank you everyone for making this coming true. I hope we can see you in the next Tua-Tua KELADI. Okay, we're going to take a picture. 1, 2, 3. Okay, once again, 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone a
you.
good day, a good weekend, and
Thank
see you
you, Haziq.
again.
Thank you so much. Happy New
Thank you,
Year.
Gary.
Happy
Thank
New
you,
Year.
Gary. Thank you, Echo. Bye.
Bye.
Eh,